So I'm going to get us started. Welcome everybody. You're all hopefully familiar with Zoomland. Um, we're really excited to share this project with you that happened last autumn. And we've got a few of the artists that took part in the project here today to share their stories with us. So I'm one of the co-directors of Magic Acorns, and I'm also an artist and one of the creative producers that worked on this project. Um, so I think most of you are familiar with Magic Acorns, but for those that aren't, Magic Acorns is an early years arts development organisation, and we're based in Great Yarmouth in the east of England. And as a collective, we've been part of this community for over 20 years. And we create spaces where children, babies, families, educators, artists can flourish together through the arts and through play. And after a few years of being nomadic and rocking up in places with vans full of stuff, we've recently opened our own dedicated early years art space in Great Yarmouth, and we're developing our creative and playful offers there. So this network was originally funded by the Festival Bridge, which is one of the bridge organisations, which are now sort of no longer, but it's been kind of rebranded, I suppose, as Connect and Create. It's part of the Norfolk and Norwich Festival here. So that's sort of historically where this Acorn network kind of came from. And although that funding's now ended, we really want to continue to find ways to kind of connect with other creative early years artists, other early years educators, so that we can kind of share the work with each other and find out about each other. So last September, it feels like another world. Last September, thanks to Arts Council funding, we invited 13 artists to come together for 9 days over 3 weeks. So we sort of spread the time out over 3 weeks to create a new piece of work for families and very young children in Great Yarmouth. And this was the project called The Nest. The artists were from a wide range of disciplines: movement, visual artists, interactive technologies, sound, music, photography, film, and other art forms. And they were also from a wide range of experiences. And for some, this was the first time that they had worked with and created for 0 to 3-year-olds. So part of the thinking about the project was that we wanted to create something at the beach and also something in our newly opened early years art space in Great Yarmouth. So for those of you that don't know Great Yarmouth, it's a coastal town. It's kind of like a long strip of a town that kind of has this big sandy beach and dunes. So there were 4 days of development where the artists came together to develop their ideas, and these were followed by 5 days where we invited families to events. And during those 5 days, we offered 3 different sorts of events. So it's quite a complex project. When I was kind of preparing for this and trying to actually write it down in words that other human beings might understand, I was kind of like, how do I explain this? So we had 3 different events, and those were the Beach Nest, which happened each morning on those 5 days, and that was with the full ensemble of the 13 artists. And then in the afternoons, we split into 2 groups. So 2 smaller groups. One of those groups stayed at the beach, and we worked with Tiny Promenade, which was like a mini beach nest. And then the other group headed back into our space, and they worked with the sensory space and the indoor space. So as you can imagine, in the build up to the residency, there was a lot of kind of head scratching and planning around how we kind of worked this and structured this. And myself and my colleague Charlotte Arculus spent many hours with large bits of paper and lots of post-it notes trying to figure out ways to create a structure for our 9 days, but whilst also trying to sort of retain that feeling of unhurriedness and of possibility, and also of care for the artists and the families and the children. So there's lots of different things that we were thinking about. And the plan kind of evolved into a relationship between kind of feeling contained and held, and also kind of having openness and stepping into the unknown. And at the beginning, before we kind of arrived on that very first sort of development day with the 13 artists, it felt like a bit of a risk bringing such a large group of artists together, and many of whom, you know, hadn't worked together before. There were lots of kind of moving parts and variables and lots of things to consider. But after that first day of kind of being together as a group of artists, we knew that it was going to be a great experience. We'd got such a sensitive group of artists together. So back in July of last year, the first time we came together as a whole group of 13 artists was for one day when we worked with Companhia Musica Teatral from Portugal. They were doing some a kind of residency training with us, which actually, Anna, you were there, weren't you, as well? And on the sort of final day, it was our Nest Artists Day where we all came together. And one of the other Nest artists, who I think is here today as well, but isn't going to be speaking, she's written a really lovely blog about that experience. And I'll share, after I've finished speaking, I'll share the link to that as well. So that was the first time as a group we'd all come together to kind of be in a creative space. The next time we came together as a group was at the end of September in our space in Great Yarmouth. And this was the first day all the artists met in our space. We wanted to create during that day a day of kind of tuning into each other, exploring and playing together without any pressures to produce anything. So with such a short kind of time scale of the work of kind of, you know, 3 days of development and then you're with families, we really wanted to try and kind of keep that first day as a precious day for kind of hanging out and playing time without pressure to produce something. And so this day included kind of arriving in our bodies through movement, tuning into listening, and walking to the beach, and also playing on the beach. During the following 3 days, we developed materials and props and choreography and video, and elements of these things became the materials for the nest. And video and sound materials collected at the beach were taken back into our space and became projections and soundscapes. And props played with or created in our space were taken to the beach and used to create a play site for the nest events. After those days of preparing the spaces, we invited groups of up to 6 families to attend. This is a really exciting step in the project because it's stepping into the unknown and the unexpected. And we're kind of always eager to see how children and babies and parents and carers would interact with the offers and create and be in the spaces. And for the artists, it's an opportunity for us to observe play and interact with the children's offers and improvise based on what's actually happening, rather than the imaginary happenings that we're sort of having in the build up to it. And they're always unexpected and surprising. So this morning, we're joined by artists Emily Thomas and Chris Dowding and Nat Whitney and Charlie Ditcham, who are going to share different aspects or interests about the residency from their own perspectives. And we're also joined by movement artist Abby Page, who's going to be sharing with us a movement activity to explore arriving in our bodies, which was such an important part of the process during the whole project. There's going to be time for discussion and questions and comments. So we'd really love to hear your kind of initial thoughts and reactions to the project. And please also feel free to use the chat kind of throughout. So to start us kind of off, because it's very hard to describe with words, we're going to share some film. And I've got a film of the beach to share with you first. The films were created by a video artist called Lewis Wickwar, who unfortunately can't be with us today because he's busy somewhere else. And we've worked with Lewis a lot before, and we really value his sensitivity and engagement with the work. And as part of this project, we invited Lewis to be an artist on the project as well as a documenter. So it kind of he really was kind of embedded in the work and part of creating the work as well as documenting the work. So I will share my screen and play this for you. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Sustain piece again, and we'll definitely do some of the movement pieces again, and just notice how it feels different. And I think it's, you know, it's how where the energy goes, you know, what these walls do and what happens when the walls aren't there anymore. Hello. Anyone got any biscuits? Hello.
What happens if you lift them above your head? Does it feel any different?
So in one fluid motion, we try and spin it like this, so we're all facing the other way, so we're lifting to that side. Try and keep the paper taut, otherwise
I
Yeah, take it easy with your voice
Yeah.
as well, okay?
In our minds. So we start with the bowl band, we've got that, and then it's the bowls coming out in a performative fashion.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's going.
Just the same people, so nobody gets left up there, because that could easily happen.
And 1, 2, 3 babies.
God, I want that. I want that one.
It's
Oh,
fine.
it's got, you know, dumpy and
Poppy,
mellow
flower and grass, standing lion grass, rainbow Diane, poppy mellow ducks, poppy mellow and grass, standing lion grass, ragwort Campion, poppy mellow ducks. So I'm going to invite Chris now, who's, well, I'll let you introduce yourself, Chris, but Chris is going to share their perspective.
Cool. Thanks, Sophie. It was really interesting seeing that film and seeing some of the time. That there was one day I couldn't make the project, and so I saw some new material there, which is quite interesting. My name's Chris Dowding. I'm a trumpet player, trumpeter, and composer and workshop leader based in Norwich. I play with and compose for quite a few different bands, but a workshop and participatory work is a really important part of my practice, and they're becoming more interlinked and intertwined as I do more of both. I'm going to talk about a few songs that came out of the Nest project, and the different ways they were engaged with in the project with the families, and also the ways they engaged with the spaces we worked in, and also a kind of quite exciting project that's come out of the Nest project, and the way the songs are going to be shared. The main song I'm going to talk about is for the moment it's called the Conch Song, and it was the song that you heard some of in the film. So if we could just have the first photo, that'd be great. Okay. So these are the words that I wrote down on our first devising day on the beach, and I wasn't able to make the next day, so I'd written this song. The first two verses that you see were some words I wrote down while we were on the beach, and then the third kind of paragraph there are some names of plants, I guess, that that we saw on the in the dunes. So we were writing down the name of plants, and Charlotte was basically telling me the names of plants. So she's a co-writer in this song. Cool. So if we could just go back to the group view, that'd be great. Yeah, and also as you might have heard in the recording on the film, the song goes into a round at the end, when it goes to the names of the plants, and so that was a really nice participatory element, and it meant that I think all of the Nest artists, by the time we did the sessions with the families, were singing those words, and so that was a really nice element to it. Yeah, and I just want to talk about how the song kind of changed in the different spaces we used, and also the way the families engaged with the song. So I've got some kind of little titles or phrases. So the first one is drones in an immersive space. So in the immersive space that we made in the Magic Acorns building, we had a lot of lighting and I guess interactive electronics, and but we also had a Shruti box. I think it was Oliver's Shruti box, and I think there was a kind of melodica hanging around a bit. So we were so those kind of drones with those instruments were kind of part of the workshops, and it meant that for me that the song could kind of emerge from those drones, and could emerge kind of naturally from the workshop and the kind of immersive way that a lot of the Magic Acorns workshop the immersive way that a lot of Magic Acorns workshops work, kind of thing. And yeah, so my second phrase is emerging from workshops. So so I guess I was thinking about that yeah, the song can emerge from the workshop without being necessarily kind of led or even introduced. It becomes a part of that becomes and emerges from that immersive space. And my third phrase is outdoor immersion. So there's a lot of use of the word immersion and immersive, but with this phrase I was thinking about the way we listened in different ways in the different spaces, and especially on the beach. I think we talked quite a lot, maybe after the project, about the different way we listen outside and the way the sound is projected outside, and it was a kind of, to me, it was a kind of different immersion. So we were, although the inside space was quite immersive in terms of the electronics and the lighting, on the beach we were still quite immersed in the sounds of the sea, the wind, and yeah, other elements, and so those two spaces were, to me, were both immersive in different ways. So so there was some also really nice participatory and interactive moments, and one moment for me was at the end of one of the beach sessions, and I guess the conch song that you heard became I guess a fairly regular element of the sessions we did, although it didn't have to. But and we would sing the song towards the end of the beach, the main the beach performances that we did, and we would lead the families back up to the boardwalk, singing the round at the end of the song, and I also played accordion for most of the project, which was quite different for me, and a really nice element, because it meant I could use an accordion that I'd had for a while, which hadn't really been used so much. So that was really nice for me. And so at the end of one of the beach sessions in the morning, we were playing the song, leading the families up to the boardwalk, and I was kind of playing accordion, and there was a young girl who was really interested by the accordion and the different parts of it, the bellows and the two the keyboard on the right and the bass notes on the left, and sh- and she was playing the accordion. So so I guess I find these kind of interactions and the way the song changes in spaces really interesting, and uh, and the way it engages in the sonic spaces of the different sonic different sonic spaces we're in. So if we could just have the second photo, that'd be great. So the other piece of music, we kind of made as a group during the project was this melody, and we made it with a kind of number system. So I think I asked everyone in the group to write down a number between 1 and 8, or and or maybe 1 to 7. So 1 to 7 were the musical the notes of a C scale on a keyboard. So the white notes on a keyboard, C to C or A to A, and then once everyone had written down a number, we put our piece of paper down in an order, and this is the melody that came out of that process. I'm just going to play it for you, a melodica. So it starts on the C. So so that's our little group melody. If we could just come back to the group view, that'd be great. So we also used the melody on the beach pieces, or the beach events, and I think for a while I was a bit worried that it might be a bit kind of mournful or kind of sad as a melody, but I kind of think that's okay, and I think it became a kind of linking parts between some of the sections of the beach piece, so it would kind of be a link that went into the conch song that you heard earlier, so that was another participatory musical element to the project. So I'm just going to talk about how a kind of exciting plan that we have for how we share these songs. There was one other song that I wrote during the project, that I have in my notebook, which was came from seeing a kind of photo of a I think it's a wild rose that I took on the beach. So that's another kind of song that came out of the project. Kind of, I guess, maybe written in a more personal way, but yeah, with the other song, this Wild Rose song, it actually came from a riff that I was playing in the Magic Acorn space, in the kind of more immersive space, indoor space, and so I think that's, for me, that's quite an important participatory element of it, that riff wouldn't have, to me, wouldn't have emerged or happened if all those people hadn't been in those space, even if it's, and also people who aren't necessarily playing or making sound. If you're in that space and if you're in that space, you're kind of part of it, and even if you're just listening, that's a really important element. So I guess there are kind of different ways, different participatory ways that these songs have kind of emerged. Yeah. So our plan is to kind of make a Nest EP. Just so we're going to record these songs a little bit more properly compared to my demo versions, and so we're hoping to ask Will Guthrie, who is a musician in Nantes in France, who actually played a well, he has a gamelan project, which is a gamelan with 2 drum kits, and they actually performed a couple of years ago in Norwich for a event organised by Eastern Ear, which is a sonic arts collective I'm part of, in Norwich, and so we're hoping he'll record some gongs for the conch song, because to me, I thought quite a lot about gamelan when I was writing that song, and we're also going to lead another workshop with families to write a song in a bit more, to write a song with families, which I do have some. I don't know. I've got some words in my Nest notebook, but they don't necessarily have to be part of it. But it's some material that could be used if they're needed. So yeah, that's just that's some thoughts about some songs that emerged from the Nest project. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing that really, really important part of the project that kind of wove all the way through it. So shall we have a little movement pause and get into our bodies? Unmute yourself, Abby.
Oh yeah. That's fairly basic, isn't it?
So yeah, you introduce yourself as well, Abby, because you were a key artist in the project. Thank you, Abby.
So I'm Abby Page. I'm a Norwich-based dance artist, and I'm an associate artist with Magic Acorns. And it was my job to get everybody moving, and particularly listening with our bodies. We were very kind of aware. Well, in our work, we do a lot of kind of tuning into children and listening to children in all sorts of ways, through the way we listen to them with our ears, but also with our bodies. And so we're going to do a little bit of that now. I'm aware some of you might be sitting, some of you might be standing, some of you might not want to have your video cameras on, some of you will be quite happy. So actually just do what makes you happy, because the main point about all of this is to tune into your own body. Okay. If you can stand, it might be quite useful. But if not, then there are options. So don't worry. Do whatever makes sense for you, okay? Okay, so I'm just going to ask you if you can hear the music, okay? Can you give me a thumbs up if you're able to? You can't hear the music.
You're not sharing your sound yet.
That's not working then, is it? Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Sorry, bear with me. Oops. Yeah. And I lost the Zoom. It's going swimmingly. I've kind of lost Zoom. Oh, there we go. Okay, hang on. Share screen. share. Let's try this again. See if we can get the music going again. Can you hear it now? Excellent. Minor glitch. So wherever you are, whether you're sitting or standing, just first of all, if you can, you might want to close your eyes and just pay attention to your breath. So we're just going to tune into our breathing. And you don't have to do anything to change your breathing. You just pay attention to it. You might want to put a hand on your chest or on your ribs or both. Again. And you might want to just feel your ribs expanding and contracting. Your chest rising and falling. You might want to play with breathing into your belly. What that feels like. You might want to feel what it's like to breathe sideways into your ribs and expand out. That might be something new to you. I'm kind of reminded of Chris's accordion, how it kind of concertinas and expands and opens and then contracts. And the ribs are a little bit like that. Those bellows. And you might want to think about what it's like if you were to breathe into shoulder blades. Expansiveness all around your torso. Now we're just going to start to kind of listen to the rest of our body. So you might want to wiggle your fingers. We talked in the Nest project about spending time being fascinated with our fingers. Babies, when they first discover their fingers, are fascinated by them, and that you can take that moment being fascinated by all the things they can do and just play with that. To rub them together and see how they feel. Amazing things, really. And then take that fascination into your wrists as well. And see how they can move and how that affects the way your hands move. All the possibilities are available to you. And then you can take that fascination into your forearms and your elbows. What that opens up to your body and your ability to move your hands and your wrists in different ways. And there's no right or wrong about this. This is just you. Just you exploring what your body can do. And whatever it does, it does. And that's great. And then you can take that fascination into your shoulders, which are amazing joints. They're all over the place. And you can focus just on your shoulders, or you can bring that into your vocabulary. So you've got your hands, your wrists, your elbows, and your shoulders, all with these different possibilities. And you can bring that into how your shoulders enable your chest and your upper back to open and contract. Remembering there's two sides to you. You've got your front and your back. We often forget about what happens behind us. And then taking that fascination into your ribs and the way they slide around, enable your spine to move and snake. And if at any point you feel just at a loss to know what to do, you can just create circles in your body. And wriggles upon. And then bring that down to your pelvis and your hip joints. And if you're a seated dancer today, you can be aware of how your sit bones, your pelvis sits on the surface that you're resting on, and how that becomes your root and everything else moves above it. And then bring that awareness down to your knees. They fold and open. And then into your ankles. Down into your feet. So many muscles and joints in your feet. And now we've reached our feet. We're going to just find a stillness and just be aware of our feet on the floor. And you might be seated and you might be standing. You might want to play with just tipping forwards and back on your feet or on your sits bones if you're seated. And just be aware of your weight on the floor and how your feet have to adjust to negotiate that rocking weight, forwards and backwards, and then maybe side to side, feeling all the surface of your feet on the floor. And again, this is equally as valuable sitting in that interplay on the bottom, on the surface of your chair. And as you rock on your feet or on your bottom, imagine the indents. So if we were on that flat sand, actually quite a lot of it wasn't flat, it was quite bumpy, what kind of indents you might leave, what impression would you leave in sand? Where are the rises in the sand, where are the falls, where are the dents? And we can build that up a little bit by shifting from foot to foot, or from buttock to buttock, if that's where you're at. Play with those dents in sand. And also to say that if you're a seated dancer, you could always use your hands on the desk in front of you or on your lap. That's also quite a nice exploration to shift from side to side and feel that, have that feedback on your thighs or on the desk, that sensory feedback. So as you're swaying, particularly if you're a standing dancer, you can now play with how swaying from side to side can encourage a change of direction in your body. body, enable you to shift to face different parts of the room. Quite nice on a swivelly chair too. If you have space around you, you might want to put a few steps in between if we change direction. Those steps don't need to be anything fancy, but they could be if you want. You'll dance, so you make of it what you will. And as you're going or thinking about potential of being on sand and the impressions that you might leave, I want to play with the amount of force you give to each step. Maybe it's a heavy step or something super light. Maybe you're digging in, or maybe you're sliding over the top. And as you pay attention to those imaginary dents in the floor, you might also think about how you might make marks in the sand. I'll just show you my feet. So maybe swishes, maybe real digging in of the heels. And again, you could be doing all of this with your hands on the desk in front of you, if that's where you're at this morning. Little play with drawing in the sand. Now, whether you're mark making with your feet, or with your hands on the desk, or on your lap, or even on the air in front of you, think about kind of rises and falls in the body, and where you might encourage those rises and falls in the body. Is it through the elbows, or the shoulders? Might be much more subtle than that. Might be just kind of a nodding of the head. These things can be ever so big or ever so small. So you can choose your energy level today. You want to really go for it. You can go right down to the floor, and as high as you can get. So you play with whatever makes sense to you today. Paying attention to how that feels. You might also want to pay attention to where there's freedom in your body and where there's resistance. All of it is valid and okay. It's just listening. You might also like to find ripples through the body. So there's a pathway, for example, through one hand, through the arm, through the shoulders to the other hand. It might be a ripple that goes through your body to your feet. And you can play with where those pathways are. Another way to think of it is like if you had like kind of a magic ball that you're rolling around your body. How would you enable that to happen? Or where does it go? If it feels too much, you might just want to bring it back to kind of playing with it in your hands. Just playing. So it doesn't matter if you drop the ball or it goes wrong. Nice. Now the last thing we're going to do bring a bit of the outside in. There's a lot of this on the Nest project is looking at what's around us, what we could bring into our bodies. I was about to say it's raining outside, so I was going to find a pitter patter in my body, but actually it's not. It's stopped the sunshine to come out, so it might be about kind of feeling the warmth on your skin from outside. It might be about a physical thing that you can see. So for me, in my living room, there's lots of quite straight lines, so I might find straight lines in my body. You might focus on something that's really soft. See if you can find a softness in your movement. Might be that you've got a remote control or something. There's buttons to press, so it might be about pressing. Again, it's all open to interpretation, so whatever you want to choose and however you want to represent that is absolutely fine. Get stuck, just think about the shape of something. Or how it moves, like drawing curtains. I'm just going to finish by finding an expansiveness in our body. And then we're going to give ourselves a squeeze. Might have a little twist in the back. A little bend from side to side. A little yawn. Just a little mental thank you to your body for all the amazing things it can do. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. That was lovely to get in our bodies. That was really lovely. So hopefully, Emily's back in the room.
Hello.
And the internet's playing, so you might want to keep your video off. I don't know, Emily.
I'll try.
Yeah, or see how it goes. See how it goes. I'll share the. Oh. Yeah. Here come the slides. Oops, I'm just going to. You ready to go?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, just let me know if I disappear. I'm really sorry.
Your voice sounds much clearer already.
Okay, good. Cool. So yeah, I'm talking about the journey of the fabric. So if we could go to the next slide. So as a dancer, I was kind of really naturally drawn to the fabric, and actually when we decided what materials we were going to take down onto the beach with us, pretty much everyone sort of dove into this bag of this kind of organza, which you can kind of see in this video. We sort of started exploring, and actually the day that we went down to the beach, it happened to be really windy. So we kind of ended up playing with the wind and holding it up with just our bodies and different arm, limbs and things like that. And we kind of ended up creating these sort of, we kind of called them sea monsters in the dunes, with different pieces of the fabric, different colours. And it was really interesting to see kind of how the fabric intertwined with the environment and how it kind of was reactive based upon what that was. We kind of all came away from it thinking that these sea monsters were really great and we definitely wanted to use them. But then I can't remember who it was on the day, but someone sort of just said, what if it's not windy? And then we all kind of realized it's so dependent on what that environment around us is doing. If it's not windy, then there'll just be bits of fabric on the floor with us chucking them in the air and trying to make something happen. So if we can have the next slide, Sophie. So that's when we kind of started looking at from what this might look like from a child's perspective, because obviously that's who we're making the work for. And whilst those sort of sea monsters were really visually engaging, we kind of realised that the fabric could be used for something a bit more tangible for families and the young people involved. So we sort of did a lot of exploration, as you can see, this is Maddie here playing in amongst the fabric, about bringing the fabric closer to the families, and what those kind of different textures could feel and look like. There was some kind of more crunchier fabrics, some more of those slippery ones. So we sort of settled upon these sort of 4 strands, which were more bluey and sort of reflective of the sea. And we did lots of playing with sort of sitting down on the floor and seeing if we could get the fabric to come underneath families and over families. And yeah, that's sort of what we settled on. We settled on the idea that we really wanted to bring the fabric towards the families once they'd settled into the environment. If we could have the next slide. So once we kind of decided that, we really liked the idea of obviously not ignoring the obvious thing about the environment, that we were indeed in front of the sea. So we really liked the idea. We kind of came up with this thing of, once the families had settled in and had that kind of initial piece of interaction with the bowls that you saw in the video and sort of smaller flags, which I'll talk about at the end, we sort of decided we wanted to kind of create a bit more of a structure with those larger pieces of fabric. So we emerged sort of from the sea, not literally, but from near enough the sea, with these large strands of fabric, and kind of created a bit of loosely choreographed movement that obviously kind of changed dependent on the mood and pace that the families were setting themselves, where we would stretch them out, kind of pull them up to the wind so the families could kind of notice them in the distance, and then we sort of had this overlapping motion where we'd sort of run and then pull back. I think right at the beginning of this kind of came back to an exercise that Abby did, I think it was day 1 down at the beach, which was really briefly in the video of us kind of going towards the wave and trying to match the pace of that, except we were now doing that with the fabric towards the families. And then we just sort of spent some time suspending the fabric around the family, kind of in that centre area. And it was really lovely to watch. And also it's really interesting how some days there were particular children who were, you know, actually we had one child who's literally reaching up trying to pull the fabric down, and then other days it was more sort of just a scene setter rather than something that they were immediately wanting to interact with. But it's really interesting to see some days the wave felt like this massive feature piece, and then other days it just felt more like kind of something that was in the background but still equally nice. If we could have the next slide. And the seagulls was a really big part of what we decided to do with the fabric as well. So we had kind of those larger, more group interactions with the fabric, and then we decided that in amongst the calm we should have a bit of chaos. And these little white flags that you can see on the side there, we had some larger pieces. I think it was a group of 5 or 4 of us emerged from the dunes, making seagull-like noises that I will not attempt to replicate today over Zoom. And we ran down the dunes, and then we sort of all glided together. And again, that was obviously very emphasised by the environment around us and being inspired by those things that we saw on day 1. And obviously the seagulls in Great Yarmouth are all around you. And that was really interesting to do, because we kind of worked with, a lot of the time it felt like the sort of screeching was really out of place sometimes, with the kind of calm that sometimes is being created by the children. But we sort of came to the conclusion that actually a lot of the time it's sort of nice to disrupt that and kind of change the pace and see and adapt to how they would react. Obviously if they were all really sleepy and calm, we wouldn't, you know, screech in their faces. But it was really interesting to see how actually sometimes that then drew another layer of play out of them. And we sort of, again, we then kind of create this gliding motion, sometimes going close to the families. And I think what's really interesting about this whole journey of the fabric that I'm talking about is that you could kind of use the fabric as an extension of yourself to kind of navigate those sometimes parameters of what the children felt comfortable with. So you kind of not push but test. So sometimes we'd go a bit closer with the seagulls if that family felt like they were, you know, doing those reaches towards the fabric. And actually a few times we had children who kind of got up and joined in with being the seagulls, and we had a couple who went and then picked up the flags on their own and sort of joined in. So it was a really interesting kind of coming together of some children who were a little more reserved with these sort of screeching gulls, and then that kind of all coming together. So it sort of, I felt like it really married the two kind of different ends of the spectrum in terms of how playful different people were, and that was a really interesting way to test that. If you can have the next slide, Sophie. And I kind of briefly touched on this, but also those white flags as well, once we're done with them, we kind of plonked them back into the sand, just to kind of set them back down to signify the end of that. But again, obviously everything kind of changed and adapted depending on the day. But another way we decided to use the fabric, and I think worked really well, was a particular favourite of mine, was sort of emphasising the environment. We sort of set the scene in this kind of dome shape, one side with these reds and these oranges that you can see here. I think there's another slide, but I might be wrong, Sophie. Oh yeah. And then the other side, we had those blue and the white that you can see there. And we put those in those larger pieces. And again, it was so interesting to see how that would change dependent on the environment. That video on the left with the big kind of orange piece of organza, obviously that's on a really windy day where they were really big and out, and then some days they were just sort of flopping into the sand a little bit. And obviously the sound as well with the fabric was so interesting to play with on those windy days where it felt really intense. But I felt like particularly on those windier days, some of the children, instead of going straight to the bowls, they would run into the flags and kind of be playing with them and darting in and out of them, and obviously we would match that energy as well. And then the fabric kind of became a signifier for me for this whole project. So that video on the right as well, you can see we put the big flag poles up with the strands of different bits of fabric on, and we also were wearing, you saw in the video hopefully, we were also wearing little bits of ribbon. So it kind of just became sort of like a little touch point and a signifier to kind of welcome people. And we sort of set the parameters of the environment with these bits of material, and kind of tried to create this idea that that's where the main bit of activity was happening, but the flags also kind of were loosely pointing down to the sea to kind of encourage people to also look around the environment and acknowledge it themselves. And I think my last slide, could be wrong again.
Oh, shall I move on?
Yeah, sorry. And then just lastly to touch on for mini promenade as well, we use the fabric to create obviously a smaller space by bringing those flags in and bringing smaller bits, which was really interesting to see how that worked really well as kind of a loose area. Although again, we did have on one day one child who was just interested in the dunes and ran off into the dunes. It's sort of interesting how again you could kind of use those flags to sort of on a safety level as well guide and stay with the children. And also in the performance of mini promenade that I did as well, we only had, I think it was one child, so it actually felt really appropriate. And it was a really windy day and it was rainy, and we were trying to kind of literally battle the elements. So actually that sea monster that I was talking about at the beginning sort of made a reappearance, and it was just really interesting to see how the fabric was so dependent on the environment. Obviously everything was, but the fabric, obviously because of its textures and the colors, felt really adaptable but also really reactive. And then also just to finish off as well, we used the flags at the end kind of as a guide to let people people know that it was finishing, and we sort of waved them off with the flags. And it was a really gentle, nice way to say goodbye whilst also kind of keeping in the themes of what had happened during both the mini promenade and the larger one. So overall, it's just really interesting for me to reflect upon that journey of day one of wanting to create these massive, huge things, and then thinking about actually what happens if there's no wind, what happens if it's rain, what happens if it's, you know, everything else. And then how we kind of, each different person and different aspect of the performance used the fabric in those different ways, and it was really interesting for me just to watch that change and develop depending on kind of day to day, and how obviously once you get the families in, everything's up for grabs. It was really interesting to see how the fabric can be such an adaptive and interactive tool. So yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks, Emily. It's really interesting to hear your reflections on the fabric, and it was, yeah, such a major part of the project. So I'm going to ask you to sort of save up questions or comments. You can put them in the chat if you'd like to. I would like to share with you now a video. So we're going to move away from the beach and move into our space, the sensory space part of the project. It's a slightly shorter film than the beach one.
There's a little tiny masking tape.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
This is just because I've got code on it to make it a MIDI interface.
Yeah.
And then so that means that when I plug it in, it's just recognising it as a USB device, or recognising it as a MIDI device.
Gives the wall a really nice surface texture as well, actually.
And I think we can work with it, but I think if we could get it on, because this is definitely working. So it is just the Ableton to. It wasn't lagging before, was it? One more time.
Oh, it's made me want to have a little sleep now. Oh, so, oh, Nat, let me find you on my screen. There you are. So I'm inviting Nat now, who is going to introduce themselves and tell us about what their experience was. Thanks, Nat.
Yeah. Hiya. That was the first time I've seen that as well, so I feel a bit sort of emotional, but sort of calm. That was lovely to look back at that. So hello everyone. I'm Nat. I'm an audiovisual participatory artist, and I play with creative tech to construct objects and spaces. And I'm also currently a trainee facilitator with Magic Acorns, which involves supporting the delivery of a weekly sensory session for 0 to 3s and their families. And so when I took part in the Nest, I was at the start of that as well. So I was still fairly new to both working in these types of ways and working with early years. And on the first 2 days of the residency, we explored a range of movement and listening activities. What I really quickly noticed is I was very aware of my body and the space and how much room my movements were taking up. And I felt really comfortable with the people in the room. And actually, I was extremely taken aback, and I think it's a shared thought amongst all the artists of how instantly safe and open the space felt. And it felt like a really welcoming space to explore creative possibilities together, even though I'd only met a few people once or twice and was still reasonably new to working in that space at that time. Yet I still had an awareness that I wasn't able to completely relax in my movements and really let myself get into it. Now in my sort of normal everyday creative practice, I'm not used to moving in spaces or in performative ways or moving with others in a space. I'm very used to being on the sidelines and more familiar with making something and putting it in a space for other people to interact with. And so working collaboratively to create spaces and events that were really built around the vocalizations and the movements of our bodies was completely new to me. And this was initially quite daunting. As someone who would definitely not step forward and call themselves a dance artist or a musician, I'll not be the first person or the second if you ask for those in that room to step forward and feel confident to say that. So yeah, I feel that the space around me allowed me to get into that because you could feel the care and the support, and try and forget what outside of the space I was considered to be or do, and really get into the residency and learn how to navigate myself in a space. And what I found through engaging in the movement and the sound activities during the residency was that I learned a lot about my own relationship with both spaces designed for sensory play and my own body's movement within them. And I discovered that having an object or a prop to support my movement or vocalizations, it instantly made me feel much more confident in being able to navigate myself in a space. And this is kind of having that realization, which now looking back seems to make so much sense to me, but I did not have it at the start of the residency. It kind of only really dawned on me sort of after those about 3-4 days. And that then made me connect lots of dots with the themes we've been exploring in creating sensory environments in the space, and more familiar ways of working in my existing practice. So if I could get Sophie to put up the first slide, there's a couple of images on there. Lovely, thank you. And so these kind of linking of the themes we've been creating, and I could see really clearly how my own practice was coming into that. This led me to explore creating interactive sound objects for the sensory space. So I've created a few interactive objects before, but I was completely new and slightly kind of scared about how do I make these sort of toddler-proof tech. I don't tend to kind of work with things that I could just put in a space and that would be suitable for 0 to 3s. But this seemed like the ideal opportunity and a safe space to challenge my ability to rapidly make something and test it in this new area. And so the outcome of this was these 3 soft conductive shapes that you saw in the film. I've got one here, it's nice and it's quite nice just to, as it is, and quite soft and tactile. So these shapes were suspended on elastic and then attached also to, there's a lovely elastic net that's sort of permanent in the Magic Acorn space. And the panel for these shapes are made up of panels. There was 2 that were made up of 2 panels, and this one was made up of a few more, just to see what it was like. But the shape was based on a piece of driftwood that I found on the beach on the first day. So I liked kind of the subtlety of, I knew that was my journey from the first day of finding this sort of very physical, low tech in a way thing on the beach, and that kind of took through my journey of the shape coming back into this sensory space and being transformed. So I wanted to keep them objects fairly neutral, and I wanted to allow them to blend into the space so that they could be discovered when exploring, as opposed to kind of jump out at you. And also that's kind of why I've kept the colours quite neutral as well, as I really like we were collaborating to create this space and it was changing all the time. That meant that the projections and the lights could change how these objects looked. We could blend them in a bit more by adding more hanging objects and things like that. And the audio within them, this came from recording short audio clips of some of the instruments we were using, both at the beach and in the sensory space. And this sort of formed a bank of sounds that we could switch between and change, which you could do quite quickly whilst you're in the space and see how it was happening and have some quite playful interactions by suddenly changing the sound to something else when someone was playing with it. So I think there was quite a lot in the video, but I've got a short video on the next slide, if it will play, just of the really kind of early setting up of the objects and a few of the other nest artists playing with them before we'd kind of put everything else into the space as well. Hopefully the sound will be... That sounds one of the bowls with water in, which makes a lovely boiling sound, which seemed perfect for the big round shape. Hopefully they work for all ages, not just 0 to 3s as well. Yeah, so that just sort of gives you a little idea of how we had a bit of a play with them before the early years had a play with them. And it was really exciting and a little bit emotional to see something you'd made in a space and being fully play tested the next day after you'd made it. And the objects were flung and bopped and pinged around the space, and lots of sort of mini games were created around that. And there was lots of sounds and vocalizations, dancing and lots of laughter, which was all, yeah, very joyful and really exciting to watch. And as someone in my practice who aims to create participatory work, but I usually work in a way where projects only exist in sketchbooks and in writings for quite a few weeks or months before they become something physical. This acted as a really welcomed reminder of the importance of playtesting and inviting people into the process of your work when you're not really sure what's going to happen. And I feel that takes on a whole new meaning when the people you're inviting in are 0 to 3, as they're not going to play with something if they don't want to, and they're not going to hide any emotion or in their reaction or what they're doing. So you really, I think, get to have quite a strong understanding of what those objects mean in the space. Yeah, so it's definitely inspired me to work more in this way, and also play with creating more soft and tactile objects and what they can do in various environments. And I'm definitely still on the journey of learning how to navigate myself in the space. And with the traineeship, it's been really wonderful to sort of keep exploring that since the residency, and actually look back where I was on the residency and where I am now. Yes, I'm finding lots of joy in that, and very sort of grateful to have had the opportunity to work in a completely new way. yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. Really, again, really interesting. I think, you know, kind of the artists that are sharing, we've got one more artist who's going to share, and I think it's just sort of showing the diversity and the range of the artists that kind of came together for this quite short period of time to create together. So I'm just going to invite Charlie to share their experiences, and then we'll have a little bit of time for, at the end of the session, for some questions and some discussion.
Hello everyone, can you hear me all right? Yeah. So yeah, I'm Charlie. I moved away from Yarmouth to go to university, and then decided to come back because there was quite a lot of arts activity going on here. And since I've been back, I've been able to work with Magic Acorns on this residency, which was a really, really great leap forward for considering how like I interact with materials in my practice, and how I kind of, you know, what am I actually trying to get out of my own creative experiences. It was, you know, a lot of what Nat said really applies to me as well. I never worked with early years before. It was a really safe environment, and it was, all the artists came from so many different backgrounds, and you're in an environment where you kind of instantly become friends, because it's yeah, it's an environment that really fosters quite precious connection. And I was amazed by working with the 0 to 3-year-olds, because you realize really quickly that they approach everything with a really raw kind of perspective, and you can spend like a couple years, you know, fiddling with this or fiddling with that, or learning this piece of software or tinkering with this, and then you play with a 0 to 3-year-old, and they'll just start playing in a way which you suddenly realize that's how I want to actually play with what I'm doing. And then you can take that sort of play, and then you can apply it to the stuff that maybe you have spent some time teaching yourself how to use. So for me, it's, at the moment, it's music and moving image are sort of my main interests. And since the Magic Acorns residency, it has sort of, yeah, transformed how I approach my work and approach collaboration. And I've had a greater access to my ability to improvise with other people, and you know, through people like Abby and Emily being involved in the residency, you know, I've explored movement, never explored movement before, never ever pictured myself as a mover, but having that amazing meeting yourself and meeting your body, and yeah, rediscovering and re-meeting really just yourself. And yeah, it's a very, very useful and precious experience to have. Yeah, and I mean, you could see it a little bit in the video. There was a sort of multicolored projection in the sensory space, which was as a sort of like contribution to thinking about what we might be able to put into the sensory space. As part of my practice, I play a little bit with analog video feedback, which is where you sort of film into television screens, and it produces lots of like different colors and shapes and stuff. But the nice thing about that is between the camera and the telly, there's space for you to kind of interact with the effects and take part in what shapes and colours take place on the screen. And so it dawned on me, like, I hadn't planned to bring that at all, but it suddenly dawned on me that that was quite an applicable thing to maybe bring to that space. And we set it up, and it was fun. People had fun with it. I think a lot of us had fun with it. Like, some of the kids had fun with it, but I think a lot of the adults had a lot of fun with it. Yeah, and it opens your mind up to, like, okay, it's great to make art and it's great to make exactly what I want to make, but it's also great to have relevance and offer, and it's great for art to be useful. And I've never been in an environment where what I put into the world is felt more useful than that, actually. You know, contributing to or creating experiences and encounters with 0 to 3-year-olds and their parents, quite like special encounters, which I think just have to be really good formative experiences for them to move forward with. If I were to sort of glimpse back at me being a toddler, like, I would want as much of that as possible. So it's a very nourishing project, and great thing to be a part of and contribute to.
Thanks so much, Charlie, for sharing your thoughts. That's really, really, really great to hear from all of you. And it's been lovely for me to listen to everything this morning, and kind of feel like we're back there, this special time together. So we've got sort of just under 15 minutes before we end, and I just wanted to open the sort of floor up to anybody who wants to kind of either make a comment or ask a question to any of us here. Over to you, if anyone wants to ask anything. If you do, you can unmute yourself and speak, or put your hand up and I'll invite you. Kasha.
Yeah, I don't know who this is to, but I'm just quite interested in kind of the key differences in engagement that the kiddies had, comparing kind of your outside activity to the inside activity, and if there was any what differences, and where the work you felt kind of got the best response, or the difference in responses.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think it's probably a question, like, looking back at footage, there will be children who went to both of those spaces. Be interesting to look. I don't know if anyone has got an immediate sort of thought about it. I spent most of my time at the beach, I have to say. Nat and Charlie, you did both. I mean, we all did both, actually, didn't we? But you were mostly in the sensory space, weren't you?
Yeah, I got to a bit of both, but mostly in the sensory space. And the main thing that's hit me, actually, seeing the films as well, and we talked about it, is sort of the expansiveness of space, and how people's sort of movements and actions carried. And I think that was a real interesting difference in being able to see that in the children's behaviour as well. In the beach, that kind of instant, some of them run to the sea, and that kind of, they had all this space to move in, and the sound carried so differently. And whereas in the sensory space, it was strange in the video actually to view it from the corner of the room, because when you're in there, it's very sort of small play, but there's quite a lot in all the little small actions and games going on. So it was really interesting to view it from the corner, actually. But I think the main difference is, I think, in the behaviour was something in that expansiveness in space, and how the children in the beach, there was definitely that sort of running and movement, as well as the small actions. And the sensory space, there was a lot of taking it in, and really small behaviours at first, and almost that easing into it. which was really interesting to watch. The longer you're in the sensory space, the more I think these sort of games and play developed, which was quite exciting to watch.
The other thing, when you were just talking, Natalie, I was thinking the thing that in both spaces, nobody wanted to leave. In both of the environments, on the beach and in the sensory space, there was this kind of sense of just being there, which was also interesting as well, I think. Yeah. Any other questions or comments from anybody here?
I just wanted to say that I think the thing I found interesting about the immersive space as someone who doesn't always work with electronics, or maybe that I work mostly with sound, and I wrote about this in a blog that I did after the Nest project that I could I'll put a link in the chat too. But I think the kind of the immersive space of the indoor space, as Nat was saying, kind of allowed for a lot of like smaller games and kind of smaller kind of ecologies within the whole group, and that was really a really interesting thing for me. And I think it's an interesting thing about Magic Acorn's practice is that yeah, is the way those kind of smaller games and ecologies and groupings kind of form. And I think that was quite different to the way the groups interacted outdoors, just maybe more expansive within the outdoor environment kind of thing. So yeah, quite interesting for me.
I love that idea of the ecologies, the different ecologies that kind of bubbled up in the different spaces and in different ways. I think that really, yeah, illustrates it really well. Thanks, Chris. Any other comments or questions from anybody here?
I was going to say about the difference between outside and inside a little bit. Outside, I think the rules of the game were a little bit less and a little bit more unknown. It's like when a child decides to run and feel that expansiveness, how far do you let them run, or what do you do about that? And for us, that was kind of quite an interesting game to play as well. Of just like, where's the edge of this performance space? We're not quite sure. We're not quite sure, and how much energy as performers do we have to kind of edge that? But it was a really lovely unknown. And also coming back to what Emily was saying about kind of the elements being partners in our dance or partners in our improvisation, that was a whole unknown too. So yeah, for me that was a big difference.
Mary.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody. It was really fascinating just to see the work that's happening in Magic Acorns, and I'm really looking forward to going down to see the space, I think. But it really brought it alive to me, and I was also struck by how free all of you are with yourselves, and how somebody mentioned about taking risks and outside comfort zones, and I just thought, wow, that's just so freeing. And I just wanted to say how inspirational it was, and thanks to everybody for sharing. I found it really moving and also educational. I just am blown away by a lot of it, actually.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. I think, yeah, that kind of being outside of our comfort zones is becoming a kind of it's becoming a thread of what we do, is to be somewhere on the edge of that, stepping into the unknown. That's important to us. So there is quite often quite a lot of feelings of discomfort at first.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mary, like a lot of us didn't actually go into that project really open, and sort of like that definitely is a result of the work, isn't it? And you know, I went into it, I would have never ever pictured myself, you know, engaging with other creatives in that way, but it's yeah, it ends up becoming a safe environment where that happens naturally, which is great.
Yeah, that's really very, very special.
Any last questions, Anna?
Thank you for sharing all of that learning from obviously from the artist's point of view, but the films were also just gorgeous, and what an important capture of, you know, they really share the event as well. So it was just lovely, and really inspirational in, you know, in that I'm just thinking, right, when can I gather quite a few artists that we could do this on Morecambe Beach?
Yeah.
So it really is, it's kind of, it's got all the ticks for me of things I'd like to develop around here. Yeah, and I've just found it really inspirational, so thank you. Watch this space.
Excellent.
If I can be inspired and create anything like that at a beach in Morecambe for the next couple of years, that would just be gorgeous.
Can we come and visit?
Yes, please. Yes. So thank you all.
Oh, thank you. Oh, and there's a question from Ruby here that's in the chat. Has watching children interact in collaborative play created an openness in your own artist collaborations or projects? Does anybody want to respond to that? Abby?
I've been working with early years for about 15 years now, and I think I don't think I'll ever give it up, because for me they are the ultimate improvisers, and keeping that sense of play and improvisation in my own artistic work is really important, so that I kind of learn a lot from well, again, that unknown, and being child-led and going with you know, what they want to do, and the way they interact with each other, for me is a really important part of what I do.
Thanks, Abby. Lovely question, Ruby. Yeah.
I just wondered if I could maybe
Go for it, Chris.
answer that question, and also Jess's question as well, about I guess my interaction with early years. And I've been thinking while we've been chatting and stuff, that I guess with this kind of the Nest EP idea that we're developing and hoping to record, I guess I'm interested in how the songs have kind of emerged from an earlier situation, but kind of in a quite natural kind of organic way. It's a bit of a cliche, but yeah, how they've emerged in a natural way, maybe rather than being in a more kind of led situation kind of thing. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, to me there's a really interesting interaction in terms of like how that material emerges from workshops, and how that interacts with my own compositional practice and work with bands and stuff. It's something a few people have kind of mentioned to me. I did a I mean, it's quite a different situation to this, but about a year ago I did a project in a prison for the first time with an octet, and we wrote a piece collaboratively with the participants for the octet, and so that was also so both of these situations have been quite interesting in the way, yeah, my compositional practice kind of coexists and relates with a workshop situation. And I suppose this Nest EP idea is yeah, kind of exploring how songs come out of earlier situations, and also there was one really nice session in the indoor space, which kind of finished with this slightly I can't remember exactly now. It was a little song that came out of the I think it was putting away the instruments, and it's kind of slightly silly song, but yeah, I'm interested in how the songs emerge, and yeah, not necessarily being kind of yeah, kind of led in a way, which I think. Sorry, I'm going on a bit here. But I think it kind of interacts with the way Magic Acorns work and their kind of aesthetic and practice in immersive environments and stuff. So that's quite interesting to me. I don't know if that's interesting.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I think that's that kind of blurring of the edges of how something begins, or where it comes from, is really interesting. Oh, we've basically run out of time. So I'm going to just say thank you to all the artists for all of your beautiful sharings today. It's been an absolute joy and a pleasure for me to sort of hear those. And thank you to all of you for coming as well and listening and sharing your thoughts in the chat and also here afterwards. I've got one little advert. On the 29th of February, Dr. Charlotte Arculus is going to be sharing their webinar, More Than Adults in Waiting, it's titled. It's going to be on the 29th of February in the afternoon, and I'll share the link with you afterwards. I'll send it around in an email, but it'd be lovely to see some of you there. It's going to be really interesting. Thank you very much for coming. Hope to see you again soon.